And welcome to a new hour inside America's News Headquarters from Washington. I'm Kelly Wright.
And I'm Kristen Fisher. It may be a holiday weekend, but there is a lot going on in Washington next week. So here's what's making news right now. Former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn is no longer talking with the president's legal team. Could he have made a deal with the special counsel looking into Russian meddling in the 2016 elections?
Plus, the massive investigation underway to find the killers responsible for Egypt's worst terror attacks in modern history.
And the political fallout over sexual misconduct allegations on the campaign trail in Alabama and on Capitol Hill. Our Fair and Balanced political panel weighs in. President Trump taking jabs at Time magazine on Twitter, claiming that he turned down a second chance to be Person of the Year. At the same time, though, the president is preparing to meet with congressional leaders on tax reform and other huge issues. Phil Keating in West Palm Beach with more. Hey, Phil.
Hi, Kristen. President Trump is apparently done with today's golf game, his fourth since coming down here for the long Thanksgiving weekend. His motorcade's pretty much ready to go at the Trump International Golf Club here in West Palm Beach. And from where it goes, we assume he'll probably go back to Mar-a-Lago, his winter White House, where the temperature's 73, sunny, and just about perfect. No word from the White House on who the president was golfing with today, but it certainly couldn't beat yesterday's foursome. The presidential motorcade drove to Jupiter Friday to Trump National Golf Club, where Trump golfed with Tiger Woods, the current #1 Dustin Johnson, and PGA Pro Brad Faxon. The White House isn't letting the media shoot any of these golf outings, so other than the daily motorcade, which generates a few stares and some cell phone pics as it goes by, the cameras really haven't shot much. In fact, the only public viewing of the president and First Lady Melania since they got here was Thanksgiving morning, when they delivered a nice lunch to the Coast Guard quarters up at Riviera Beach. No tweets so far today from the president, which on this, quote, working vacation is new. Trump's last week came last night. Quote, Time magazine called to say that I was probably going to be named Person of the Year, like last year. But I would have to agree to an interview and a major photo shoot. I said probably is no good and took a pass. Thanks anyway. On this upcoming Tuesday up back in Washington, Trump's meeting with the Big Four congressional leadership at the White House. That is Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, House Speaker Paul Ryan, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. The big meeting there at the White House on Tuesday is really primarily all about avoiding a federal government shutdown next month. The House and the Senate have until December 8th to at least come up with a short-term budget extension. And we'll see, you know, they're really not good at compromising so far this year, so that could be some hard negotiations to get a long-term budget in by December 8th, Kristen.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot to accomplish. Phil Keating down in Palm Beach. Phil, I know that location very well. Watch out for the iguanas overhead. They've been known to drop a little present or two on the correspondents below.
Yeah, maybe an iguana or something.
True story. Happened to me. Watch out. Thanks, Phil.
Oh.
Following several sexual misconduct accusations on Capitol Hill, a bipartisan group of lawmakers are pushing a resolution that would mandate anti-sexual harassment training for all members and their staff. Marianne Rafferty has more for us from L.A. Marianne, good to see you. What's the latest on this?
Hi, Kelly. Well, the resolution, if passed, is meant to be a wake-up call for lawmakers, especially in light of recent sexual harassment claims made against Senator Al Franken, with multiple women coming forward with claims of harassment, including groping and unwanted kissing. Senator Franken issuing an apology yesterday saying, quote, I've learned from recent stories that in some of those encounters, I crossed a line for some women, and I know that any number is too many. Now,
without Marianne's audio there. So we'll continue to work on that and try to get back to Marianne as soon as possible. But her report was about following a slew of sexual misconduct accusations on Capitol Hill. And she was discussing how lawmakers are calling for a necessary first step toward preventing sexual harassment in Congress by conducting more training on anti-sexual harassment as well as discrimination training. So we'll continue to follow those developments. And if we get Marianne back, we'll bring her back later in the program. Kristen?
Yeah, so the Senate at the same time is expected to vote on their GOP tax plan next week when Congress returns from the Thanksgiving holiday. The tax vote will set the pace for the end of the year, which includes votes on big topics like immigration. Molly Hendenberg is here in Washington with all the latest. So much to do, so little time, Molly.
That's right, Kristen. Hello. The Senate may vote on its tax reform legislation as early as Thursday. Some big differences with the House bill. So this is heading to a conference committee to work out how much tax relief to provide to families and to businesses. But one GOP congressman is optimistic and says Republicans are, quote, determined to do something.
I sense a matter of urgency as well as of determination on behalf of the House and the Senate that this is something we want to get done. This is a promise we made the voters, and we want to fulfill that promise and keep that promise.
But one House Democrat isn't so sure. He says the House plan, for example, cuts taxes too much and will lead to reductions in funding for government programs and will add to the deficit.
It's not a question of doing something, but rather what is the product that you're actually producing? You look at that and you go, oh my, does this make any sense? Where did the deficit hawks go? We're talking about a $1.5 trillion increase in the deficit. Where did the deficit hawks go? They all migrate to Florida?
Here's a look at some of the top priorities on Congress's to-do list. Avoid a partial government shutdown by passing a spending bill that funds the government after the current one expires on December 8th. There are other appropriations bills as well that are waiting for congressional approval. In addition, as we talked about, tax reform and tax cuts. Also, immigration, funding for President Trump's promised border wall, as well as how to deal with so-called dreamers, illegal immigrants brought to the U.S. as children. President Trump will meet with the Republican and Democratic leaders of the House and Senate on Tuesday to press for his legislative agenda before the end of the year. He also will meet on Tuesday with a larger group of Senate Republicans as that chamber works on tax reform this week. Kristen?
Well, Molly, Congress has 12 joint working days before the end of the year. We'll see if they can get it all done by then.
A lot to do. Oh, boy.
Thanks so much, Molly.
Egyptian authorities now say more than 300 people have been killed in an attack on a Sinai Peninsula mosque. That attack now being considered the deadliest in Egypt's modern history. Amy Kellogg has more on that story. Amy?
Hi, Kelly. And also, very significantly, this was the first time that there has been an attack on Muslim worshippers in Egypt. Typically, Kelly, in the Sinai, the Islamic extremist groups go after law enforcement officials and Christians. Now, this attack was inside a Sufi mosque. Sufis are a more mixed branch of Islam. They recite poetry, they revere saints, and they are considered heretics by Salafist Muslims. The attack happened in Bir al-Abed in northern Sinai. Sinai is the part of Egypt that goes from the Suez Canal east to Gaza and Israel. It has been sinking deeper and deeper into poverty and extremism in recent years. Among the 305 killed yesterday were about 30 children. Funerals are being held today. Muslims bury their dead within 24 hours. The mosque was filled to capacity for Friday prayers. Terrorists in all-terrain vehicles and armed to the teeth set off a bomb in the mosque and then shot at people as they fled, having burned cars around the mosque to impede entry of emergency vehicles and exodus of the wounded and fleeing. Egypt was quick to retaliate with airstrikes on vehicles said to have been used by the attackers. Granted, no group has claimed responsibility yet, but Egyptian security says ISIS flags were found inside the vehicles used by the attackers. There is an offshoot branch of ISIS active in Sinai. Some say the Egyptian government's heavy-handed approach to terrorists in recent years has only aggravated the problem, but President al-Sisi has said there is no way he's letting up the fight.
The military and police will return security and stability with absolute power in the coming short period of time. This is our retaliation. We will respond to this attack with brutal strength to encounter these terrorist extremists.
The second most deadly attack was not that long ago, Kelly. It was in 2015 when a plane full of Russian tourists was exploded in flight. All 224 people died then. But back to this attack, Kelly, 3 days of mourning have been declared in Egypt.
Yeah, Amy, I
Kelly.
recall that attack that took place as well on the plane, and now this one. Would it appear at this point then that we may see an uptick in insurgents, perhaps trying to carry out attacks on Muslims within that country?
Well, apparently, bit by bit, there has been sort of a campaign against Sufi Muslims because, as I mentioned, they are considered by the hardcore Salafist, sort of Al-Qaeda and ISIS brand Muslims to be heretics. And so, you know, we've seen them in other countries. These groups like ISIS go after Shiites, for example, and apparently now Sufis are really falling into their line of fire, their target list, if you will. Al-Sisi is vowing to crack down hard, but I don't think we can predict, but we do know that they are in the sights of these extremist groups, Kelly.
And that says it all. They're in the sights of these extremist groups. Amy Kellogg, always good to hear you and see you talking about the unfortunate, deadliest attack in Egypt's modern day history. Thanks, Amy.
An operation by Iraqi forces to push ISIS militants out of some of their last desert strongholds in Iraq has entered its third day. Shiite paramilitary troops known as the Popular Mobilization Forces have led the assault, but Iraqi police and army troops are also taking part in the fight. The force pushed ISIS from Rawa, its last urban stronghold in the country, just last Friday.
Coming up, collision at the dead of night between a train and a passenger car. We'll tell you if the driver survived. Plus, today, you may not know it, but it is Small Business Saturday. Now you do, where thousands of Americans take time out to help mom and pop stores have a merry and profitable holiday season. And our political panel is here with the fallout for so many politicians on both sides of the aisle, facing harassment allegations, including Senator Al Franken.
Excuse to just be touching people.
Following several sexual misconduct accusations on Capitol Hill, a bipartisan group of lawmakers are now pushing a resolution that would mandate anti-sexual harassment training for all members and their staff. Marianne Rafferty has more on this from L.A. Marianne, good of you to join us again. What's the latest on this?
Hello again, Kelly. The resolution, if passed, is meant to be a wake-up call for lawmakers, especially in light of recent sexual harassment claims made against Senator Al Franken, with multiple women coming forward with claims of harassment, including groping and unwanted kissing. Senator Franken issuing an apology yesterday saying, quote, "I've learned from recent stories that in some of those encounters, I crossed a line for some women, and I know that any number is too many." The House resolution is aimed at driving that point home. Ranking Member Robert Brady of the Committee on House Administration says, quote, "We cannot tolerate any discrimination or harassment in the workplace, and we cannot have a system that protects offenders." Now, the committee will vote on the resolution next week.
All right, Marianne, let me ask you something then. What about allegations against other prominent figures in the media and elsewhere?
Well, yeah, Kelly, lawmakers not alone in this storm of sexual harassment allegations. Just last week, prominent news anchor and host of CBS This Morning, Charlie Rose, was fired and had many journalism awards and honors rescinded. And CBS, PBS, and Bloomberg terminated their contracts with Rose. And the Roy Moore campaign down in Alabama, plagued with sex abuse allegations, but Moore, still maintaining his innocence, will hold a rally on Monday, the first since November 16th, where reporters were told not to ask any questions about those allegations. Kelly?
Marianne, thank you. Marianne Rafferty reporting from L.A. And as we look more into this, for more on all of this, let's bring in our political panel. Radio show host Garland Nixon and Josh Kimbrough join me now to weigh in on this issue. So this is a very important topic. And it's one of these situations where now we're seeing that Congress is reacting with trying to develop some training on sexual harassment, as well as all kinds of discrimination as well. That would be sexual, racial, Tell me, if you will, what your take on all of this is. How do we move forward and redeem all mankind, for that matter?
Well, to me, it's kind of amazing that Congress is just now getting around to putting in place measures to train members and staff members about sexual harassment. I mean, you have for decades Republican and Democratic majorities that have not addressed this. If you worked in corporate America, if you've ever been in the business world, been an executive, managed people, you've taken a sexual harassment class, you've learned about how to behave in the workplace. But frankly, a lot of the things that we're having to teach members of Congress and their staff, you shouldn't have to have a course on this. I mean, you know better than to do what Al Franken's done, or what we're now learning that candidates on the campaign trail have done, or things that former presidents have done. What this really is an issue of abuse of power, where people in powerful positions, whether it's in the media or it's in politics, believe that they are above the law, the rules don't apply to them, and there are no consequences for their behavior. So it's a good thing that we're doing this, that Congress is moving forward with this resolution. It should pass. I would think there's bipartisan agreement that sexual harassment's bad. But it's amazing that Congress is, A, just now doing this, and that, B, you have to tell members of Congress who should be among the more successful people of our society not to grope people with whom they work.
Garland?
Well, I think that also, additionally, other than just internally, I think that Congress and local state legislatures should look into any legislation that should address this in a broader fashion. I'll tell you why. One thing we're seeing, it started, with the media and moved into politics. We're seeing that that people who do this don't come into our society; they come out of our society. We're looking at a mirror of our society now, and I think we need to look at this in a broad way so we don't. It's easy to pick out individuals and say this person is a bad guy, but this is a societal issue, and most women that we talk to in our lives have, in some way or form, experienced it in some way.
It's an early Christmas miracle, because Garland and I agree here. This is a bipartisan agreement that politics is downstream of culture. And what you're witnessing in Congress, and frankly, stuff like Harvey Weinstein in the media, is I have a political activist back in South Carolina with whom I speak on the radio program all the time. She says to me that when her mama used to tell her, when you put filth in, you get filth out. Our culture has objectified women and to some degree men. We have a culture, whether it's on Netflix or in Hollywood, the hookup culture, that casual sex at any given moment's fine. You can do what you want. There's no consequences. That fantasy land has now inculcated our culture with the belief that you can behave sexually however you like and there are no consequences for that. Now it's come downstream into politics. And again, it's great that Congress is going to pass a resolution. But there is no amount of laws, there's no legislation you can ultimately put into place that is going to restrain people from behaving badly if they don't have an internal moral compass on this. I mean, I'm marrying a woman in about 3 weeks who has told me, if you go and do something like this, I can guarantee you'll never do it again. So first off, my faith and my family taught me not to behave this way, and I'm pretty sure I'd pay for it at home if I did. That we need to help people understand that this is unacceptable behavior, but that legislation cannot fix problems that are culturally pervasive.
Congratulations on your upcoming marriage, by the way.
Thank you.
But Garland, to what he's saying, it's really talking about our culture, as you've talked about too, and how culture is reflecting now in our society, where all three of us are men, and men, because of the appeal of money, power, and sex, have fallen deep into the abyss, and a lot of times they fall down, they don't know how to get back up. So how do they get back up in such a way that they can restore honor between men and women?
Two things. I think, number one, it's good that this is coming out now, because the fact of the matter is that if a person is sexually harassed by or assaulted by, a wealthy member of Congress or someone who is in Hollywood and they bring it up, that it will be addressed. But the woman who works in the grocery store or, is walking down the street and deals with it, most of the time they don't have the means or the wherewithal to address it in a way that they won't suffer in some way themselves. So I think part of it is discussions like this that bring it out. And the other side is, I do think that it's possibly we should look at some legislation to ensure at least that companies or organizations have rules. Maybe you can't tell them what to do, but you could have legislation that says corporations, companies, groups, or whatever must have some rules or some way to
but both
at least
parties
address
will have
this.
to lead the conversation. I mean, beyond just legislation, we have to lead the conversation because, again, these are things that people should just inherently know are wrong to do. You can't legislate it away.
Well, and we have it's wrong to lie.
Well, they already know
right. But no, I'm not saying we don't take measures, but the point is when you look at what's going on here, this is a cultural problem more than just a political problem, and we have to handle it carefully. Because you want to empower these women, in most cases, who've been abused, to be able to speak without fear of repercussion or being trashed for speaking openly about what happened to them. We also have to make sure, as a society, we don't overcorrect and just look for ways to attack each other left and right. So both parties will have to not try and politicize this. Both parties are guilty. Republicans and Democrats have behaved badly, and we need to police our own instead of making it partisan. We only attack the other party when one of their guys or gals gets caught. We need to openly condemn people in our own ranks who behave this way.
I think you just made a case for some whistleblower laws, or some type of whistleblower laws for women that turn in people.
Well, so with this conversation that's coming up and the fact that we're having this conversation now, to the women that have been offended, and the apologies and the corrections being made, what do you say to men who are trying to correct it and get over what they've done in order to say, yeah, I'm wrong, I committed a sin here, by God I'm forgiven, but in the court of public opinion, I may not be so easily forgiven.
Right. I think the first thing is that, we see that when people are accused, there's different tracks. And I think the best track that I've heard is that people that say, look, I did it, I apologize, and I'm wrong. I think you can start with redemption from there. Mm-hmm. I do think that people have a right to contest something if they believe that it is unreasonable. Mm-hmm. But I do think that the best track for people is to accept when they have done something wrong.
Yeah, we have to make sure that, that the evidence...
make a lot of excuses.
The evidence substantiates the crime that is true, and once it's true, these folks need to come out, be clear about what they did. Don't excuse it, don't qualify it, don't try and say, it's okay under the circumstances. It's not. Humility is a great thing. I used to hear that the path of contrition is filled with many friends, but the path of pride is a lonely road. I think members of Congress and all of us should remember that, especially as we go into the holiday season.
Gentlemen, thank you. Very fascinating conversation. Garland Nixon and Josh Kimbrell. And again, congratulations on your upcoming marriage. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful, happy marriage.
Thank you.
Seems like your wife is a great lady who's already saying.
I'm marrying up.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Christian.
Still ahead, a big week for the Republicans' tax plan as it heads to a vote in the Senate. What details of the tax bill will get the most scrutiny? And your local small businesses want you to cash in on holiday deals. Our Brian Yennis standing by with more details on Small Business Saturday. Hey, Brian.
Hey, well, Small Business Saturday has been around since 2010. A chance for you to do a little good and spend a little money at your local shop. We'll have more about the Shop Small Saturday after the break.
In between Black Friday and Cyber Monday, local shops are getting a chance to shine. Today's Small Business Saturday, and across America, local businesses hoping for a boost heading into the Christmas season. Brian Yennis is live in Queens, outside one of those small businesses with a look at how shoppers are turning out. Is there a big crowd out there, Brian?
Hey, Kristen. Well, yeah, there is for this bookstore and for a lot of the small businesses we've seen here in Astoria, Queens, actually my neighborhood. But, there's 30 million small businesses in this country. 99.9% of the jobs really are in these small businesses. And when you're talking about this day, Small Business Saturday, it was created in 2010 by American Express and Small Business Administration, who wanted to promote holiday shopping at these small businesses. So they created this day right after Black Friday and obviously before Cyber Monday. And this bookstore behind me, the Astoria Bookshop, opened in 2013, and it has been participating in Small Business Saturday ever since. Every Saturday, this bookshop sees its most sales, but the owner, Lexi Beach, says they see 2 to 3 times more sales on Small Business Saturday. It's been a huge help in beginning and launching off the holiday shopping season. And Lexi says American Express has done an incredible job of really promoting Small Business Saturday so that people know to go out to their local businesses, shop and spend a little money and do a little good by encouraging the shoppers to really, spend a little bit in their neighborhoods. She spoke to us and says that, listen to what she said about the importance of the day.
If you're looking for whoever it is in your life that you need a present for, a book, there is always the right book that we can help you find. And to depend on people needing a book every day is not enough to pay the rent. You have to give them an excuse to come in, and sometimes that's Small Business Saturday, and sometimes it's a reading with a local author, or our weekly kids story time, or writing workshops that we host. We have a very busy events calendar, and it's great to see crowds come out.
And since 2013, according to the National Federation of Independent Business, the number of shoppers participating today has grown every year from 77 million customers and shoppers in 2013 to 112 million last year who went out to their small businesses. The amount of money also spent at local businesses has increased from $14 billion in 2013 to $15.4 billion expected to be spent at small businesses all around the country today. So a really great event, a chance for you to do some good, keep your local businesses opened, like the Astoria Bookshop and others. Go out there and spend a little cash, save some. You don't have to spend all your money on Cyber Monday. Kristen.
That's what I'm waiting for, Cyber Monday. Brian Yennis, live in Queens, New York. Thanks, Brian.
It's a big week for the Republican tax reform plan as the Senate, well, it's set to vote on their tax bill this week. President Trump and GOP leaders have praised the plan, but it's met some stiff opposition, particularly from Democrats and even some Republicans. Joining us now with more insight on this is Steve Bell, former Senate Budget Committee staff director. Steve, thanks for joining us today. This is an important topic for President Trump as well as the Republicans because they want to do something legislatively and get it passed. But looking at this, let me just go over this right here because it says that the president says cutting corporate taxes will lift the middle class through higher wages and more jobs. Is he right about that?
To a certain extent, yes. The best estimates are somewhere between 0.3 and 0.4% would be added to GDP. Now, that's a controversial number because some people say it'll be 1%, which is huge, and some people say it'll have no impact. But I think the best analysis is it will have a slight impact, especially among smaller and medium-sized businesses that do most of their work here in America.
That's important because that, according to the president, as well as those who support him on this plan, the Republicans, they're stating that if you can do that, then you're generating jobs. But it's our understanding that Wall Street is not necessarily raising its hand saying, yeah, give us the corporate tax cut and then we'll immediately start hiring people. So how does the president get corporate America to follow in lockstep with that particular plan should the tax plan be approved?
I think if you're a small businessman, you need two things. You need fewer regulations, and the president's taken some steps, serious steps on that. And number two, you need smaller taxes, littler taxes. And I think we should remember something. Big international companies that are headquartered here in America almost never pay anything next to 35% tax burden. Almost never. They play in this, for example, Apple is in the single digits. That's what they pay every year as their corporate tax. But if you have a small business in Omaha, Nebraska, and it's entirely inside the United States, you're paying somewhere between 34 and 35%.
That's amazing because in those small businesses, most small businesses average 50 employees or less.
Right. But it is, what people don't understand is this is not a sop to big business like it's thought. Because big business, quite frankly, doesn't ever pay 35%. And if you have an accountant at Apple and you're paying 35%, you'll fire the accountant. But if you're Joe's tool and die shop in Akron, Ohio, and you have 60 employees, you are very likely paying the entire 35% burden.
So this is that opening that House Speaker Paul Ryan was talking about. If we give the businesses the break, that will result in higher wages and employment for the American people.
Well, I think if you take a look at the numbers, one thing, Kelly, that we've had a problem with is creation of more small businesses.
Right.
It's gone down year after year. One of the reasons is taxes. Another reason is regulation. So I think that if you take a close look at this, this is a net plus, and I think you could turn around that small business creation.
Yeah, okay, you said a net plus because some of the detractors of this bill, I'm going to quote one right now, former governor of Maryland, O'Malley, said $1.5 trillion added to our debt, that this bill doesn't even pay for it. So those are the Democrats and even some Republicans who have some misgivings about this particular bill, the House version, and they're dead set against the Senate version because of various things that it has.
One is going to increase the deficit in the short run, no doubt about that.
Okay.
But let me ask you this. Over the next 10 years, America is going to have about $300 trillion over that 10 years in GDP. And this is $1.5 trillion. This is not quantum mechanics. You know, you're talking right here about arithmetic. So it probably will have in the short run. But what people don't realize is we need to get more revenue eventually because we are lagging far behind in defense spending. And I think we've heard that from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So this is a big, big deal.
It sounds to me, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but remember we were kids and our mothers used to give us castor oil.
Yes.
It was always good medicine for us,
Yes.
but we didn't like it.
We got better, but we didn't like Mama.
Well, I always loved Mama, but I didn't like when she was giving me castor oil.
Right.
So it sounds to me like this is a tax plan that the Republicans are trying to get through, but they're not like Mary Poppins saying just a teaspoon of sugar makes the medicine go down.
No,
there's no sugar on this right now.
Not right now. And look, there are lots of things in the Senate bill which are objectionable. The tax cut for individuals ends after 6 or 7 years. Well, that's never going to happen.
Right.
We start in 2019 instead of 2018 on the tax cuts for business. So there's lots of objections, but in the larger sense, we need to get growth in this economy. I'm a deficit hawk.
Okay.
But we need this tax bill, I think.
Steve, thanks for joining us. I don't think anyone's ever heard the tax plan explained just the way I did it with Mary Poppins and Mom's castor oil. But
Well done.
thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you
All
for
right.
having me.
All right, Kristen.
President Trump getting tough on terror after more than 300 worshipers were killed at an Egyptian mosque. On Twitter, the president made a renewed call for the wall and a travel ban, his travel ban, to keep America safe. So here with more on all of that, senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, Rebecca Heinrichs. Rebecca, thanks for coming in on this holiday weekend. Appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
So what do you make of the President Trump's tweet? An appropriate time to be calling for his wall and travel ban?
Yeah, I mean, what he's talking about is he wants to keep the border safe for the United States. And we've got this war against Islamist extremism, and it doesn't really have borders. It can, it travels in the minds of people. And so we've seen this, the terrorist attack in Egypt, of course. El-Sisi is trying to crack down. He's trying to, he's got a multiple front of Islamists who are causing problems from Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And so what President Trump really needs to do at this point is demonstrate the solidarity and support with Sisi, with the Sisi government, as it tries to work with neighboring countries. It's working with the Israelis to try to crack down on what we're seeing as this ISIS increasingly growing in the Sinai Peninsula.
So President Trump spoke with the Egyptian president yesterday, offered his support, but do you believe that he needs to be doing more, offering even more support to the Egyptian president?
The United States does supports, I believe it's the second greatest military aid package that goes to the Egyptians next to the Israelis. And this year, it was interesting, the State Department announced we're going to be withholding some of the aid we generally give on the condition because of some human rights violations of Sisi. This goes sort of crossways with what the Trump administration has been doing, which is saying that the best thing we can do for human rights is to counter Islamist radicals. And until we can combat Islamist radicals, we're not going to be able to deal with human rights problems. So, I really think the Trump administration needs to square this circle. Even Rex Tillerson has said that we're not going to put human rights first. We're going to crack down on Islamists. And so it doesn't really make sense. So if the Trump administration is serious about this, I would recommend that they go back to the State Department and look at what they're doing and saying, and back fully the Sisi government so that he can do what needs to be done to protect minorities. He's been protecting the Coptic Christians, which account for about 10% of the population, but they're about 90% of the Christians there, and protect these Muslim, groups that are in minorities and that are peaceful. And so the Trump administration really needs to take a look at this aid package again.
We know that a lot of these attackers were carrying ISIS flags, but we've heard so much about ISIS being on its heels. What does this attack in Egypt, the worst in the country's history, say to you about ISIS's capabilities, even though it's been hit back so much in recent weeks and months?
Sure. As the United States and our allies really crack down in Iraq and in Syria, you're going to see ISIS move. And so what we're looking at now is perhaps because of this uptick in attacks in the Sinai, that perhaps they've just moved and they're trying to hold and take territory there. That's why it's in the U.S. interest to cooperate with Sisi and to make sure that this doesn't become the next widespread battleground.
So switching gears to Saudi Arabia and Iran, this has become such a huge hotspot in in recent days after the Saudis charged Iran with an act of war. A missile came very close to the Saudi capital. How hot is this getting?
Well, it's getting hot. And again, during the Obama administration, one of the sort of centerpieces of the Obama foreign policy was to legitimize Iran and to sort of, before it was isolated, and now they try to legitimize the Iran. That's why you had the Iran deal. And as a result, the Iranians were flush with cash, and it continued to support terrorism throughout the region. One of the groups it supports are the Houthi rebels in Yemen. That's the group responsible for shooting this missile towards the Saudis. Thankfully, the Saudis have a missile defense system, their Patriot batteries that the United States made, and they intercepted the missile, which is remarkable. But again, this is we're dealing with now sort of the fallout of the Obama foreign policy. And so the Trump administration is trying to embolden now Iran's adversaries, which are the Saudis, and corner Iran again and sort of isolate them to sort of, try to dry up some of these funds that it's using to terrorize the region.
Well, and you also had this week the Saudi crown prince calling Iran's supreme leader the new Hitler of the Middle East. I mean, that's a pretty bold accusation. Do you think we're going to hear anything from the White House about that?
Well, the Iranians, they still are run by this Islamist ideology, the IRGC, that the Treasury Department has now said it supports terrorism. They're anti-Israel. They paint death to Israel on their missiles when they test missiles. So it makes sense that this regime would be compared to another anti-Jewish regime, and it certainly makes sense.
Well, and the Saudi crown prince saying that Iran needs to be confronted. So pretty hot region. Thank you so much for being with us, Rebecca. Appreciate it. Kelly.
Coming up, Obamacare premiums are on the rise, why they're going up, and what lawmakers are proposing. And the force is strong with these cocktails where you can find a night spot fit for a Jedi.